But this is a person called Lewis Latimer, and I know not most of you haven't heard of him, but he's one of my heroes, and he's actually a Unitarian. But he lived a long time ago, almost like 160, 170 years ago, and his parents were slaves. And they escaped from slavery because they were African Americans, and this is at a time when many African Americans in our country were enslaved. And so his parents escaped from slavery and had to go through a lot of moving around to avoid getting caught. And Lewis was born, and he was a really kind of clever young man, and he really appreciated what he did. But as a young child, he loved to draw, and he loved to play music, and he wrote poetry, and he loved playing with machines. Do you like playing with machines? Do you ever open up something that's and then you try and put it together again and you realize it doesn't work anymore? That happens to me almost every weekend. Sometimes, yeah. It's all part of exploring. It's curiosity. And so he loved to do that, but he was really smart. He could put things back together again and work. Well, when he was young, he was almost 16, and he lied about his age so he could get into the Navy, because he so wanted to get into the Navy because he wanted to fight for his freedom during the Civil War, and he got his freedom. But then after that, he went into an office, and he was just sweeping floor and running errands. But he saw these people were doing these really clever drawing, because he worked in this lawyer's office where they basically, worked with inventions. And he saw all these different inventions getting made and saw these people doing drawings of them and thought, I can do that. So he learned to draw really carefully and became the top craftsman. But that wasn't enough for him. He became an inventor in his own right. And light bulbs that we have here? Well, Thomas Edison, who's a famous man, have you heard of Thomas Edison? Yeah. He gets the credit for this, but fact is, Thomas and Edison's light bulbs only lasted a couple of days. Lewis Latimer found a way. Welcome, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. And Lewis Latimer recognized that I can make these better, so he found a way of having light bulbs last for days. And that's only when they became popular, even though Thomas Edison gets all the credit for it. Lewis Latimer really was the one that made it into everyone's home. But that wasn't enough for him. He invented other things. Do you know what else he invented? Not so important here, but when I lived in Texas, he invented air conditioning. That was very important. And he also worked with Alexander Graham Bell and helped him develop the telephone. And we all know the telephone. So he was involved in developing all these things, but because he was African, he never got the credit. But that didn't stop him. He wrote poetry, he published poetry, he did music, and he always worked with hope, because he felt if he worked hard, if he tried, if he learned, and he loved learning, he thought, I can always have a better life for myself. And then he eventually, he was a Unitarian, and said he started a Unitarian church in New York City, in Queens, New York, if you've ever been there. And he developed that Unitarian church, which is still there today. If you go to that church, there's a picture of him in that church. So this is a person I think is really inspiring, because he always lived with hope. He developed all those things, never got credit for it, but he really appreciated it. And so he's an example to me of someone who really lived with hope. And he finished this when he talked about the light bulb. He said, like the light of the sun, it beautifies all things in which it shines, and it is no less welcome in the palace as it is in the humble home. Because he wanted light bulbs to go to everyone, so he developed. That's just my writing, my notes, in case I forget anything. I want to make sure I don't forget anything important. But the other thing that's happening today, we're talking about light, we lit the chalice. Well, today is the last day of Hanukkah, which is a big holiday in the Jewish. And you can see we've got a menorah lit, except one candle's not lit, because we'll light the last candle at sunset tonight. Because each teachers do, is he? Today's day, so we lit the first candle last week. We'll light the last one tonight, and that's to honor the Jewish tradition and the holiday of Hanukkah. So thank you all for being here. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas and a good New Year, and I look forward to seeing you next year, if I don't see you on Christmas Eve. I invite you now to join me in a spirit of prayer, meditation, and reflection. These are the words of Unitarian Universalist minister Kristen Green. Spirit of love and truth, help us to feel you in our breathing in and our breathing out. Quiet our minds, even if only for a moment. Still our bodies, even if just for a moment. Soothe our souls in this holy moment. When uncertainty pervades, give us rest from worry. When fear rises, give us peace. When pain surfaces, give us a balm. Some of our spirits are so weary. Some of our bodies feel fried. Some of our minds feel frantic and uneasy. How long will this last, we ask in desperation. Spirit of life-giving love, remind us of the cycles of life so that we may turn towards the dawn, turn towards the thaw, turn towards the rebirth of spring with new hope. Make that hope alive in each of us, O Holy One. Ignite that hope so it burns brighter than our fears. And may that bright hope shine for others to witness, that our faith may be a beacon and our love a lamp to light the way. O luminous Spirit, fill us with gratitude as we turn towards one another in the human family, never alone on our journeys, always reminded of a greater love that holds all of us. I invite you to join me in a time of silence.
I don't like wishful thinking or prayers of petition. These are things that make me feel like I'm spinning my wheels and just waiting for something to happen. I don't have energy to wish, possibly because I did so much of it in my youth. I was an awkward kid. I was overweight and I wore shirts my mom made for me and husky jeans bought too long so they could be cuffed and survive years of fashion backwardness. My dad cut my hair, gave me a butch every couple weeks, and I represented my parents' values of frugality and independence. Independence to them meaning, don't you worry what the other kids think. Not worrying would have been an impossible luxury, and that is where wishful thinking came in. I wished so much to fit in and to be popular. I wished I could be a great musician. I wished I could play a team sport well. I wished pretty girls liked me and cool guys wanted me around. When I look back now, the more isolated I felt, the more I wished. Each decade has brought me further from wishing and regret and more into gratitude. And gratitude creates hope for me. A grown-up feeling of hope, hope without wallowing or waiting or self-pity. The paradox for me is that hope isn't about hoping. It's about acting in ways that reassure me about the world. After the 1989 earthquake, I walked almost every day under the redwoods in Huddart Park. After 9/11, I went to Bean Hollow Beach several times a week just to stare at the waves. I have carried this habit forward, hopefulness through nature, hopefulness for the earth, that the earth will abide. The peace that comes from letting go of personal control. I don't know what will happen next, but I do have a feeling of hope for all of us. If I can do it, you can do it. And if you can do it, I can do it. When I work in this direction, hope is something I feel that wells up in me It doesn't fix me, but it fuels me. Thank you.
I'd like to begin with a poem by Steve Garnaas Holmes. Abandon your thoughts of feelings, the moods that come and go. Hope is a practice. An act you can do even as you mourn or regret or dread. Hope is an act of trust, regardless of what the future may hold. Trust in the gravity of grace, the life that sings in all things, the Arctic tern facing an ocean who lifts her wings and goes, the stream that unfurrows through the woods, the roots that reach and curl around stones, the earth that circles around the sun one more time and one more time again, the child who turns to her mother, the hand of the healer on every torn thing. Hope is not wishing, but acting, birthing, planting, getting up. This month we've been talking about choosing hope, and the first Sunday we talked about hope as a commitment and not a feeling. And then last week we talked about hope as action. We talked about what we can do around advocating for climate change, advocating against climate change. And then also we had the boxes for raising food for Second Harvest Food Bank. So those of you who went here last week, there's still some spare books, boxes, origami boxes in the social hall, so you can pick one up. We're putting money in every meal time, and we're going to collect them on the 25th of January, and we're going to give that money to Second Harvest Food Bank. The Christmas Eve offering, will, rather than going to my discretionary fund, will also be going to Second Harvest Food Bank, because we know the food banks are in desperate need, especially when it gets into February, because they have a lot of people donating in December, but by the time we get to February, they're running short. So this is deliberate that we are planning to give that money at the end of January. But that's hope as action, because I think we know that sometimes the best way to feel hopeful is to act in benevolence, act in love, act in care, act in compassion, and act for justice. Today I'm going to talk about the path of uncertainty and hope, and uncertainty being the soil that makes way for hope. And one of my colleagues a couple of months ago and I were talking, he said, yes, uncertainty is the soil for hope. And I kind of took the wind out of his sails and said, yeah, but uncertainty is also the path of fear as well. So there's that tension, uncertainty, I mean, many of us approach uncertainty with legitimate fear. We saw little James coming up there. That was so brave of him for the time for all ages. His first time here, and he walked up there, and you could see him. He was really determined, and it was really good. And then, of course, he didn't want to leave as well. You never know where hope will take you. But thinking of hope, of uncertainty as the soil where hope grows. I thought that was really interesting, and there's got that tension between hope and fear. And how do we resolve that? Because as human beings, we cannot be hopeful all the time. It's just too difficult. Life is just too challenging. So how do we overcome that? How do we grow our capacity to be more hopeful? Well, as I say, I kind of took the sails out of my colleague's idea. And I hated it because I do not like to be a cynic. Despite being from Scotland, I do not like to be a cynic. And Maria Popova says that critical thinking without hope is cynicism. Hope without critical thinking is naivety. Critical thinking without hope is cynicism. Hope without critical thinking is naivety. And I think that's really interesting. So we need to bring hope, needs to be discerned. You can't just be blindly optimistic. Optimism is this idea that we assume things are going to be okay. Pessimism is we're going to assume that things are going to be bad. None of us have that certainty. None of us have that certainty. Whether we're optimists or pessimists, none of us have the certainty about how things will turn out. And that's where the uncertainty is the soil where hope can grow. I thought one of the most powerful scenes I've ever seen in a movie about hope was one of the strangest places I've ever felt hopeful. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie The Pianist, a Roman Polanski movie. Now, Roman Polanski's a very problematic character, so I acknowledge that up front. Very problematic character. The Pianist is a powerful movie about the Holocaust. And there's a powerful scene where this Jewish family are about to get deported on the train to the death camps. And they know things are bleak, but they don't exactly know what's happening next. There's this element of uncertainty. And they're all waiting at the train station. There's a whole group of people getting shipped to the concentration camps, the death camps. And people are going around, someone's selling candy for ridiculous amounts of money, and the kind of patriarch of the family says, what are you going to do with that money where we're getting there? And this person was an optimist. He says, when I get to the camp, I'm going to be rich. And the patriarch was a little bit more skeptical about what the future lay in them. He said, well, how much do you want for that small piece of candy? And he charged some exorbitant amount. And the patriarch bought it. And he took it, and he had this whole family around him, 3 generations of family. And he took a knife and he cut up this piece of candy into pieces. And he gathered the family. They talked about how much they loved each other. And they had a little communion with that piece of candy. And he took that. And there was that moment of connection, that moment of care, that moment of love with each other that expressed hope amidst the uncertainty. I find that incredibly hopeful scene because we knew how that was going to come out, and that patriarch knew, but he thought, in this moment, I'm not going to lose my humanity. I'm going to express the love I have for my family through actions, through words. I'm going to show care I have. I'm going to maintain our humanity and our relationships, regardless of the bleakness of our situation in the future. I think there was a real hopeful aspect of that in a very strange circumstance. So I invite you to think about that when we see these difficult circumstances where people hold on to their humanity, prioritize their relationships with one another. That's one of the biggest expressions of hope in uncertain times. As the poem that I read at the beginning said, hope is a practice, an act you do even as you mourn or regret or dread. Hope is an act of trust. Regardless of what the future may hold, trust is the gravity of grace, the life that sings in all things. I love what John said in his reflection about gratitude and generosity creates or helps him choose hope. Because ultimately, hope has a gratitude for the life we have. And that generosity of that patriarch of the family giving out the candy as a way of showing his love in desperate circumstances was an act of gratitude and generosity. What gives me hope amidst the uncertainty? And there's a lot of uncertainty in the world right now. We look at the tragedies we've had in the last week. Rob Reiner's death, the Bondi Beach shootings, the shooting at Brown University. There's just so much pain. Of course, we've got the existential crisis of climate change. I know I cannot be hopeful all the time, but I need to be part of a community. I need to be part of a community of courage. I need to be part of a community of grace. And I need to be a part of a community with commitment. Because I cannot be hopeful all the time, so when I'm not hopeful, I need someone in this community to be hopeful. And when you're not hopeful, hopefully I could be a beacon of hope for you. We need to be hope for each other because we cannot be hopeful all the time. We are all carrying too much. And we can't act with pessimism or optimism. Pessimists think things are guaranteed to get worse, so there's no point in acting. Optimists think things are going to get better, there's no point in acting. Cynics, they just don't believe anything good about other people. So we have to walk those lines between pessimism and optimism, idealism and cynicism, and we have to walk that path with hope. Not knowing what can happen, but believing that what we do now matters. How we act now matters. What we say now matters. Because a small flame in the darkness can make all the difference to someone who's struggling. We can be that small flame. And I think that's the message of the Christmas story. The birth of Jesus. For some reason, people thought this was important. Joseph and Mary didn't really know what was going on. They were traveling away from home. They had this baby. Shepherds and wise, magi were coming to honor them. Angels were appearing. That must have been pretty confusing for a new mother. But there was something important, because what that life said was new life always has the potential. New life has that hope. Any of us who have been parents or been around new children, we see so much this potential for life. It's inspiring. And it goes through various phases as a parent as you get older. You see you're less hopeful sometimes than others. But there is that idea, the hope of the Spirit of life, the hope of the Spirit of new life will forever inspire hope in us. And I think that is the Christmas story. And I think we look at that Christmas story and we know how it ends with Easter. But that doesn't demean the hope of that birth of the baby Jesus. So in uncertain times, with uncertain outcomes, then I think it's more important than ever for us to act. Because the uncertainty creates an environment where what we do can make a difference, because there's no outcome guaranteed. The writer Rebecca Solnit says, hope is an embrace of the unknown and the unknowable, an alternative to the certainty of both optimists and pessimists. Optimists think it will all be fine without our involvement. Pessimists take the opposite position. Both excuse themselves from acting. Hope is the belief that what we do matters, even though how and when it may matter, who and what it may impact, are not things we can know beforehand. So uncertainty is a reason to act, not a reason not to act. I think ultimately about hope is for us to thrive in life. Sometimes we get into modes where it's about survival. And surviving is not thriving. And we think of this too shall pass. That is not a statement of hope. That's a statement of survival. That's a statement of resilience. But resilience is not the same as thriving. And I think at this winter solstice, this time where darkness is its longest, where the dawn is latest and the sunset the earliest, this time of darkness is a rich time. We often think, we have to look forward to the light. But as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I love the darkness. For me, darkness helps focus, because when everything's flooded with light, you can't really see, you can see everything. When it's dark, things are chosen. We can only see the stars when it's dark, not when it's light. I remember a friend of mine was at the opticians, and he was complaining because he was short-sighted, and the optician took him out. It was dark, and okay, can you see that? He said, the stars. He goes, how far do you want to see? We can see clearer, we can see further in the dark because it limits us. And think of the idea of the play. We have the play that's flooded with light and the actors are on there. But most of the work, most of the creativity, most of the camaraderie happens off stage preparing for the time and the light. Plants begin, seeds burst forth in the darkness, not the light. The darkness can be that time of creativity, that time where we can create the future we want, where the work we do is social movements to the side, away from the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speeches, away from the politics in Washington, the movement of social movement of various organizations who are working hard in climate change, in better education, in healthcare, in economic inequality. Those things are going on away from the spotlight. That is what gives me hope, knowing that there's many people throughout the world working for the betterment of the society. The work that St. Francis does, the work that Second Harvest Food Bank does, it doesn't always get the spotlight. St. Francis got the spotlight today. It won't the other 52 Sundays, sorry. But you know, that's work that goes on, and that's what gives me hope. I want to finish up with a poem by David White called Sweet Darkness. It says, when your eyes are tired, when the world is tired also, when your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your womb tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Sometimes it takes the darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. Those are the words of David White. So when light is scarce, that single candle, that single act, that single word that we can lift people up with is of greater importance. It's a precious, hopeful thing. I remember when I was travelling in Scotland, we always had tea lights in our car. We'd keep a candle in the car. Because if you got stuck in snow drift, if your car broke down, if you light a tea light in your car, that provides enough heat for a night in a car. One tea light. That's what each of us can be to those who are in need. Everything changes. The future's uncertain, but everything changes not by magic. It happens because of the small, life-affirming, life-enhancing, and even life-saving acts of individuals throughout the world. So I think hope, ultimately, is having the courage to say yes to uncertainty, but it's a yes and. Yes, and I'm going to take action. Yes, I am going to commit to this. Yes, I am going to face my fear with courage. And hope is believing that what we do is right and true, not because it's successful. Hope is a yes to life followed by action, moving into the spaciousness of uncertainty that makes all change possible.